Hi, welcome back to Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. Our next episode, we're very fortunate to have none other than Mike Whitney as our guest today, having played for Australia and also for New South Wales, and not forgetting his stint in Gloucestershire. The man has a lot of experience to talk about. Today we'll talk to him through the eyes of a cricketer. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. Of all people to interview, Mike Whitney to me is a person who has a lot of stories to tell.
Yeah, a lot of stories, Norman. It's been a very entertaining last nearly 40 years, that's for sure.
Now, let's look at your personal life. I mean, obviously cricket is you're well known for cricket. But there's a lot more strings to your bow. You've got everything from being a lead singer in a band through to the Sydney Weekender for some 23 odd years as a host or part of the actual... You're an executive producer these days, I believe, in that as well.
Well, not executive producer, but just very quickly, my executive producer left the network last year, and they really changed the structure of how the show was going to operate. So I've had to take a little bit more of a role in there, which is outside of just being a host. I wasn't expecting to do any of that, but I've really enjoyed it, and I'm across the whole production side after being in television for nearly 25 years. You get across how the whole thing sits together. So I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and working with Alan, the guy that left last year for 20 years, was going to be something new, and it has been something new. I've sat in the edit suite for a while and talked about different things with our series producer that I've never spoken about before. So yeah, it's keeping me entertained, that for sure.
I'm sure it is. Also president of Randwick Petersham Cricket Club, which has a great history to it, which I think is one of your proudest achievements to date. Playing for Australia certainly was one of them, but even that aspect of your career that continues to happen.
Yeah, I think, look, when you have a long first-class career, which I was very fortunate to have, at the moment of retirement, and I think this is bizarre, people ask me all the time now, are you still involved in cricket? And I think, what a silly question that is. After representing your state and your country and Randwick, I only played for the Randwick Cricket Club, how could you walk away from that and not have any interest? So people slot into different levels. I mean, some people stay at international level, want to become coaches or selectors, whatever. Some people come back to state level, Sheffield Shield or first class level. I decided to go back to clubland because if it wasn't for the people at the Randwick Cricket Club when I turned up as a 17-year-old who encouraged me, made me believe, got me allowed to play in some trials, asked if I could go out and bowl in the nets when I first got into first grade in 1979 as a net bowler and all this sort of stuff, I wouldn't have really had the opportunity to play for the Blues. And then if you don't play for New South Wales, you can't play for Australia. So around the turn of the century, we merged with Petersham Marrickville to create a new entity called Randwick Petersham, and they needed a new president. And the last president of Randwick was Phil Tressiter, and the last president of Petersham Marrickville was a guy called Wayne Mulherron, who I'd actually played a couple of Sheffield Shield games with. And they asked me would I be the new president, and I said I haven't got the time. And they talked me into it, and I said I'd do it for 2 years. Get the foundation stones in and lock it away. Well, I think this is my 17th term, and there's still unfinished business there. I mean, we haven't won a first grade two-day premiership, for example, and I want to do that. I'd like to win every grade, Point of Green, Green Shield, and the club championship in one season, but I know that's a really big ask. But it's been wonderful to be there to watch players develop, like Usman Khawaja. Usman come to our club as a 15, 16-year-old. We watched his development and then very, very young, not long after he got into first grade, and he was going to be very special. So we take, even though Usman's playing in Queensland now, he's one of ours. Simon Kadich come to New South Wales from Western Australia. He needed a club. He came to our club, mate, just the most wonderful cricketer, wonderful, wonderful person, had a wonderful career. Numbers of other players have come to the club.
Monty Panesar, for example.
Monty played with us. Nathan Horrocks came down from Queensland, not even in the New South Wales squad. He come to play for us. We made him captain of our first grade before he knew he was in the squad, playing for New South Wales, got back in the test side. So personally for me, I take great pleasure. And numbers of other players, like we've got young Jason Sanger at the club now, and you know, I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but wow, he's like very, very special. And to see these kids develop, and I've always got this thought in my head that if they have half the opportunity that I had, and even just have a taste, and then it's up to them to kick on, and to be able to play a role in that as the president of the club is really fulfilling.
Talking about opportunities, your career and the way that you started to play for Australia, that's a hell of an opportunity. that happened to you?
It was bizarre. Look, I got picked to play for New South Wales in 1980. I think I played 4 games, and we only played 9 Shield games in those days. Tasmania wasn't a full member, so you only played them once. That changed very quickly, but a couple of years after that. And in the off-season, after that first season, I wanted to go to England and play, so I signed up for a league club in the Northern League in Lancashire called Fleetwood, and just wanted to go and play, weekend cricket in the leagues and just keep bowling and learn more of the craft, because it's very different in England. And out of the blue, got a call from a mate of mine at Gloucester who was on an SO. Do you remember the SO oil company? An SO scholarship, Greg Geese, a fabulous cricketer from Newcastle, wonderful batsman. And he said that a seamer called Brian Brain, who had taken thousands of first-class wickets, and the great Mike Proctor had broken down, and they were looking for a bowler to fill in at the time. So I went to Fleetwood, and they gave me a release as long as I played for them on the weekend. I could play midweek cricket for Gloucester or a Sunday league game. And on the basis of that, I signed up. The hilarious thing was I was getting £65 a week at Fleetwood. And Tony Brown was the secretary at Gloucester. I played this trial game on the county ground and knocked over a couple of people. One of them was a really established first-class cricketer. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he'd scored 20,000 first-class runs and knocked him over. Anyway, this Tony Brown, ushered me into the secretary's office and said, we want to sign you. I went, okay. He said, we'll pay you something like £200 for a 3-day game and £120 for a 1-day game. Have you got a car? I went, no. He said, we'll give you a car. He said, what about your airfares and that? I said, I haven't got an airfare home. We'll pay for the airfares. And he said, if you sign today, I'll give you £1,000 cash. He said, have you got any questions? I said, have you got a pen? Signed the deal and drove back in this brand new Fiat and had all this money. It was just amazing. Then on the top of that, I get selected to play for Australia. So it was boom, boom, boom. And it was, look, I didn't know at the time, but I was the first Australian to be picked for Australia while the Australian side was touring another country and that player was in that country. It had never happened before. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times now, but it had never happened before. And before I knew it, I'm at Old Trafford, rooming with Dennis Lilly, who to me was like God. We'd all grown up in that era and watched the great DK doing his business. And debuted the very next day as the 313th Australian Test cricketer. It was bizarre. And that Ashes series, as you would know, was called Botham's Ashes in the end. So there was a lot going on in that series for England. Beefy had captained the side in the first couple of games, failed at Lords, and I'll never forget watching that on TV as he walked off the ground and the members sort of went like this. Next minute they bring Brealey back and Brealey says to Beefy, you just do what you got to do. Then there was Headingley, there was Edgbaston, then there was, unbelievable, then there was Old Trafford where he got 100 and I was very fortunate to get him out. Then we went to the Oval and drew that test match. But I played in those last 2 tests. It was like a dream, Norman. It was like a boy's own annual story that had been printed about me and it came true. It was bizarre.
Well, that's the very point of through the eyes of a cricketer. That's something that we dream of, but you've actually experienced it.
Mate, I hardly knew. I'd met those guys maybe once when I was 12th man for New South Wales, or the couple of games that I'd played. I, of course, knew of Lilly and Marsh. Kim Hughes, I was a huge fan of him. He was such a dynamic player. And, he really looked after him. People ask me about Kim Hughes, and I go, look, all I can say about Kim is this. When I got picked to play for Australia, he sat me down and he said this, I'm really supportive of you. If there's anything that you need, call me any hour of the day. I'll help you out. I'll do anything for you. Now, no matter what anybody says about Kim Hughes, whether you like him or you don't like, how can I bag that?
No.
I mean, he was fantastic to me, gave me opportunity in both those tests to bowl, and bowl at good times, which was just wonderful. He could have gone, oh yeah, we'll bring him on, when Dennis is really tired and give him half. But he didn't do that. He gave me genuine opportunity, and he was just really good. But, there were other players in that side that were just heroes to mine. It was, I think about it now, it's a long time ago, 1981, but it changed my life forever at that moment. It was a life-changing experience.
Let's go to some of the grounds that you've played on around the world. The experience of walking out to a ground in India or Pakistan Run us through some of those experiences.
Yeah,
and the players you played against, of course, as well.
Well, India, the only opportunity I had to play in India was playing in a Masters tournament at the Brabourne Stadium in Mumbai. Just bizarre. Just even walking out, because that's the home of the Cricketers Club of India. And that place is super special. I mean, they've still got the old area up in the stand where the old gentlemen sit up there and read, smoke the odd pipe. Very English, you know, you can have your tea and all this sort of stuff poured out. But just to play there was fantastic. I played in a couple of grounds in Sri Lanka. We played at Kandy. We played at the Sinhalese Sports Club for the first test there when I toured there with the Australian team. And we won that test match there. I know Mike Coward is onto this too. But Australia hadn't won a series in the subcontinent since 1969, and we went over there in the early 80s, and we won that series in Sri Lanka 1-0. They were 3 unbelievable test matches, and the first test match Sri Lanka should have won, but Shane come on in his first test. He got 4 for nothing, and Greg Matthews got a few at the other end, and we bowled them out about 50 runs short after us having to follow on. And I think at the time it was the biggest victory that Australia had won after being asked to follow on. So we won that series 1-0, and no one ever talks about it. It never gets mentioned, and we hadn't won since 1969.
You mentioned Shane Warne there. You actually roomed with him on that series, I believe.
I was his first overseas roomie. It was hilarious.
Tell us a bit about that.
Oh, look, you know, back those is when he had the mullet and he was a little bit more tubby and his face looked different. But Alan Border said to me, you know, you're the second most experienced in first-class cricket and the second oldest after Alan on tour. You got to look after the young punk. So I roomed with him. These were the baked bean days, and you know he was just so funny. You know, Errol Alcott was our physiotherapist, and you know people were still smoking. Then Shane smoked, so Errol would light up a cigarette, and Shane would hold it exactly the same way, and Errol would have a glass of wine, and Shane would have a glass of wine. Oh, it was just amazing. But we had a good time, and it was, for me on that tour, and I'd already seen Shane play a little bit, but he bowled to me one day in the nets, and, you know, having a batting average of 5 obviously states that I was not very good with the bat. But I just couldn't get a bat on him, and he actually hit me with a top spinner off a length that just grazed my cheek. And I thought that day, and I'd heard Steve Warren and Mark Taylor and a lot of people actually talk about what potential he had. I ended up saying to him that day, get out the net. I've got a bat this morning in the test match. Get out the net. I have not got bat on one delivery, and you bowl me 25 deliveries. So he bowled me a couple of seamers, cross seam that I could hit, you know. But the talk was, if he just gets this all together, he's very special. And history says now that he was very special. And I mean, just, you know, the way he refined the things that he did, and the mental game that Shane loved to play. Oh, I've invented another delivery. Well, half the time he didn't. But they'd be looking for it, and then that Zutter would slide through and he'd get someone else LBW. But he was very clever, and when I watched him bowl, it just looked like he was bowling leg spin all the time, but he had one underneath. He had a wrong in early days. More spin, less spin, different trajectory, different speed. I think the greatness about Shane and the great spin bowlers bowl 1 or 2 overs on a wicket, and they immediately know the pace, how much revolutions, the speed that they've got to bowl to get maximum turn. And Shane worked that out instantly. He'd bowl 1 or 2, and he knew, if I bowl that, I'm going to turn it this far. If I bowl it a little quicker, it's going to slide on. He summed that up like a magician immediately, and then just set the field. And the captains that he played under were excellent captains and just knew where to put the people and exert the pressure. Of course, he also played with the great Glenn McGrath. And I use the word great rarely, but man, he was something special. So you've got him at one end and Shane weaving this magic. He took 700 wickets, Glenn took 500. That says it all.
It certainly does. We'll come back after the break on TV Arcana. Welcome back to TV Arcana. Mike Whitney is still here, and I'm very glad about that. He's a lot more to talk about. Let's hear some more facts about his career and what surrounded that career. Mike, we've talked a bit about Shane Warne. Now, on that tour in Sri Lanka, you had the great Murali, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the first time we'd actually seen him. He hadn't played for Sri Lanka at that point, but we played Prime Minister's 11 or a board 11 in Candy for our warm-up game. And I do remember specifically our skipper, Alan Border, coming off, 20 not out at lunch, and Murley had bowled a couple of overs. And he said, I can't pick this guy now. Alan was one of the best players of spin of all time. And he said he couldn't pick him. And it was very difficult to actually... We were just trying to watch his hand, and it just looked so unusual. And then he was bowling a top spinner, which, as you know, ended up going a little bit further round to bowl the doosra. But he was turning the ball square, and then these ones were jumping off a length. But some of them looked like he was bowling leggies. It was just bizarre. He was very, very unusual. And, of course, went on to, what did he take, 900 or something?
800.
800 wickets, yeah. I mean, unbelievable bowler.
The word doosra. Tell us what you know about that word.
I think it means the other way.
Right.
I think Murley was the person that actually, got that going.
Well, the word doosra is also a word out of Urdu, which is a Pakistani language, which, again, there's a story about Mohan Khan and the likes of Saqlain when he bowled, I believe, in WA.
Well, he bowled that as well. What a great bowler Saqlain was.
Yeah.
What's that story? I haven't heard that story.
Okay, well, the fact is that Tom Moody was facing Saqlain and the likes of Mohan Khan was behind keeping, and he would call out doosra, which is the Urdu word for other way.
That's right.
And that's where the word apparently came from.
But and Saqlain would bowl that one then.
So you have to wonder where the true meaning of doosra came from. Was it, in fact, Murali, or was it before him with Saqlain? Interesting story, which I think...
on the back of that, you would have thought then it comes from the Pakistani team. And
you would think so, wouldn't you?
And the word has been universally adopted as because, they all bowl, or they all try to bowl it now, don't they? If you haven't got the doosra, you're not sort of in the game, are you?
No.
A magnificent delivery, but I mean, I can't even suspect to think of how many wickets that Matai Muraliran would have got with that one delivery. But it was a top spinner first. He had these degrees of off spinning that he was bowling, and then he would just whip this one like a yo-yo almost right out the front of his hand. It was so difficult to pick. Right. But I will say this, a few of the boys were watching his action as well in that game and sort of thought, oh, it looks a little bit sus, and then unfortunately for him, he did get called a number of times, particularly out here.
A certain 5-letter word, I believe.
That's right. But he got it right, and whatever people say to me about Murali, and I go, mate, he played, they tested him, they gave him the green light, he got hundreds and bowled the best players out. And even if you have got a suspect action, let me say this, if you bowl with a suspect action and you bowl crap, you're going to get smashed all over the place. You still need to bowl it on that dinner plate, know what that batsman does, set your field accordingly, and do it. And he did it. Time and time again. So I would never criticise that guy, and he's one of the loveliest human beings you'd ever meet.
So take us to the 92 World Cup here in Australia.
Yeah.
And the Pakistanis in particular.
Yep.
Tell me some of the experiences you had with that team.
I had a nasty one in Perth.
Did you?
Yeah, I went out to bat, and we were going to lose the game, really. I mean, Bruce Reid and I were batting, and we needed like 40 or 45 or 5 overs with... Wasim Akram and Waqar Yunus to bowl the last 4 between them. And Bruce Reid had an average of 3 and I had an average of 5. Anyway, Mushy's bowling some leggies. I went push forward to one, and I think I just clipped my pad, and it sounded good, actually, and Mohan Khan took the ball, and they all appealed. I probably should have walked off as a number 11. I might have batted 10 that night in front of Bruce Reid. But I stood my ground, and the South African umpire gave it not out. And Mohan went off, called me a cheat, all this sort of stuff. So he had his gloves doing this, and I just slapped his gloves like this, which I shouldn't have done. But I took offence of being called a cheat. And he blew up, and Wasim Akram ran in and said, "Why don't you hit me?" And I said, "Take another step and I'll drop you, don't worry about that." Imran, who I'd played with in 84-5, 84-5, sorry. He just stepped in and went, "Everybody calm down," with handsome Imran sort of sleeked across the ground, calm down, and he went, "Wait, calm down, please, calm down." So we did, and I think Chook Reid might have got out next over we faced another over, I can't really remember, but we both got reported, and The match referee had left the ground and had to be called back. He wasn't happy. And I got interviewed of what happened, and he was very taken back about the swearing that was going on. But I told him what happened on the ground. And then it got to Moen, who was there with their manager, Intercab Alarm, and asked Moen a question. And Intercab said, "Oh, Moen's English is not that good, so I'll reply for him." And I thought, yeah, it wasn't too bad out on the middle of the ground. So I ran in, many years went by, ran into Moen about 6 or 7 years ago at another 2020 tournament, which was going called the Indian Cricket League, the ICL. And we saw each other on the ground in Chandigarh. And he walked over and said, "Last time I saw you, or the time before that, we were arguing." And I said, "Yeah, mate, it's a long time ago, and we're both settled, so we need to kiss and hug and make up, bit of man love, and forget about it." So we did, and Mo and I are great friends. So that's the nice thing about that. I've never wanted to carry anything off the ground, but it was certainly a savoury incident, one I'm not that proud of. I should have kept my arms to myself, but in the heat of the moment, I took great offence at being called a cheat.
Thanks for that. We're back very shortly after the break. Welcome back. We've got more to talk to with Mike, and I'm going to turn now to Pakistani bowlers, or in fact, subcontinent bowlers of your time.
Yeah.
What they did in terms of reverse swing and the like. Tell us about that experience.
We weren't really across it in Australia at all. I mean, I remember seeing Sarfraz play in a Boxing Day test in Melbourne. Probably, would that have been the late 70s or something like that?
Would have been late 70s, yeah.
But I remember watching it on the TV, and I might have just got into first grade or something. The ball was going absolute gun barrel straight, and then he started bowling, and within a couple of overs, it was swinging a metre either way, and he took a quick 6 or 7 and bowled us out. So we didn't really know what was going on until Imran Khan come to play for New South Wales. And we weren't really sure what that was going to be like. But I've got to tell you, before I tell you any stories about being influenced by him, he was fantastic for us. We ended up nicknaming him Ace because he was the ace in the pack. He bowled his heart out for New South Wales. He batted fantastic. Dirk Wellham was the captain. He never, ever tried to come over Dirk Wellham as the captain. He respected Dirk as a captain, but always there for some advice if Dirk said, you know, what do you think we need to do, all this sort of stuff. But I was bowling in the nets one day, and I've got this beautiful oldish ball with a beautiful shiny side on this side and a little bit of a rough side here. And I'm trying to bowl these in-swingers, and the ball's drifting the other way. And it happened to me before. And I'm thinking, oh, my wrist or my action's not good. I must be falling away and dropping away. And I'm trying to get the point of this shoulder around and get my wrist in there, and it's not going. And I just couldn't work it out. So Imran said in the net, "Now, what's the problem?" I said, "I'm trying to bowl an in-swing and it's going out and I'm worried." He said, "Turn it round." He looked at the ball, just said, "Turn it round." So the shiny side's now on the inside and it's gone. And I've gone. He said, "This is how we bowl this reverse swing." He got Jeff Lawson, he got me, he got Brad McNamara, he got Steve Waugh, and showed us basically how to prepare the ball, what the ball needed to look like, what condition it needed to be in, how to bowl it, how the swing was different. It's not a like normal new ball swing, it's more of like a curve, and it can dip as well. It can not only curve, it can actually drop and dip. So after that season, we really worked hard on that, and the SCG in my whole career was a turning wicket. So if you got picked to play for New South Wales at the SCG, you bowled the opening spell, and then you didn't have a trundle till just before tea. That changed everything. Henry and I, and all the New South Wales bowlers, particularly Stephen and Brad McNamara, got really, really good at it, and we knew exactly how to bowl on Adelaide. I employed it in Adelaide in a test match there and took 7 for against the West Indies.
Wow.
And that was all from Imran. And then if you follow that through with Wasim and Wakar, and they were experts at that as well. Experts. Kapil Dev could also bowl. I mean, if you can't bowl that stuff in the subcontinent, and I've spoken to Wasim about this, if you can't bowl that on those flat wickets in the subcontinent, you're just fruit for the side screen. So it was an ingenious, and we still don't know how it works, I don't think, but it works. And we got that good. We'd look at the ball and go, if we work on this shiny side and put some moisture in it and really shine it up, the aerodynamics changes and it swings reverse or Irish swing.
So take us through a delivery with that knowledge as a bowler when you did bat. obviously at a high position like level number 10.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, just through your eyes as a cricketer. What did you experience at that moment? Your ability to then predict such a ball?
No, I was frightened. The thing was, you're always trying to look at the seam and see where the darker side is. And for me, if someone like Wasim Akram was running in and had that shiny side outside, he's trying to swing that into me, I'm thinking, and it would leave me. It'd beat me outside the edge of the bat and sort of come in and then S away. Well, I'm gone. Being, number 10 or 11 with a batting average of 5, I'm gone then. He could bowl, an orthodox left-arm spinner, and I'm out, basically. But to watch them work over the top order, look, basically, Norman, when I was batting, I just tried to hang in there for the people at the other end. There was very few opportunities for me to score runs. I didn't have a lot of shots. I just worked on defence. And, that worked once when I blocked out the great Sir Richard Hadley in Melbourne, and we drew that test and won that series 1-0, which brought the Trans-Tasman Cup back to Australia. And, again, in that game, we needed 30-odd runs, and there was Craig McDermott and I, and we had to face like 4 overs from him and Danny Morrison, who was a good bowler, Danny, quite sharp as well. And we got through it, and it drew the test. And that was one day where it all came together for me. But those subcontinent bowlers, when you actually realise that, they're bowling pretty much on flat-turning wickets all the time, and you look at the amount of wickets they took, and even Capel took over 400 wickets, and half of those were in India on decks that are really hard to bowl on. They're just so skillful, mate, really skillful.
It says it all, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Be interesting, Mike. We might come back after the break on TV Arcana and talk more about current cricket. Welcome back to TV Arcana on Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. Mike Whitney here with me. Okay, let's turn our mind to the current era. Now, T20, which you didn't play an actual game of, did you?
No, it wasn't invented. Even when I retired in '94, they hadn't even spoken about T20. No.
And you recently were involved as an umpire, you were telling me.
Yeah, between the Randwick Petersham Cricket Club and Randwick Rugby Club, which are we're sort of brother clubs. They're the rugby in the winter and we're the cricket in the summer. And, went out and umpired on Coogee Oval. And...
how was that for an experience? Did you find
I warned them, don't get hit on the pads. For all the ones that I didn't get, yes, you're going to be straight out. Look, it was a wonderful day. When T20 arrived, because I'm so dialed into Test cricket, and to me that is the real game. 5 days, changing conditions, changing strategies, the wicket's changing. When do you employ the spinners? How's it going to work? What are the quicks doing? Fatigue, last innings. Are you still got the chops to bowl the side out, all this sort of stuff. Then that goes back to first-class cricket, and we only play 4-day cricket here in Australia. Loved 4-day cricket. It's time to get a result. 1-day cricket, I was aware. And then this 20 overs. You've got to be happy if you bowl your 4 overs and go for 30. 6 or 7 and over, 8 and over. So I sat back and watched it for a number of years, particularly when the IPL started, which is a decade now. I wasn't a fan. If you had told me in 1994 when I retired that there was going to be dancing girls and flamethrowers on the ground and music in between deliveries and all this, I was probably a bit old school for that in my mentality. But I've watched it now for a decade. I'm not sure of the figure, but I think it's something like 60 or 70% of the revenue in world cricket now comes from T20. The IPL has spawned the Pakistan League, the BBL here in Australia. There's a West Indies League. There's a South African League. It's all over the place now. It's giving younger players, particularly, when I talk about the BBL, you will see some players playing in the BBL that no one is aware of. Chris Lynn, for example. No one, unless you follow Sheffield Shield or domestic cricket, no one would know who's Chris Lynn. Well, people know who Chris Lynn is now, and he is so exciting. I've never seen anybody hit the ball that far. He hit a 6 last season. How do you hit the ball that far? Just the sound it made and the timing involved in that. But it's given these guys an opportunity to actually have a career outside of Test and first-class cricket, which I think I would have never have thought about that even 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So it's generating a lot of money. It's giving a lot of cricketers the opportunity that wouldn't have got it either way to play on a world stage.
Well, there are other countries such as Afghanistan. There's a great example, isn't it?
Well, isn't that a great story? I mean, how do you come from a war-torn and ravaged country, and it's not just now, I mean, wars have been going on there for decades, for thousands of years. Those people are so resilient, and they've got some really fabulous players. Now, my opinion is this: the ICC, who are loaded, have, my understanding, they've got billions in the bank, should be looking at places like Afghanistan and pumping money into countries like that to really improve their cricket, encourage young boys and girls to play, because the women's cricket is stepping, and really put a focus on that. They should still be doing it, maybe not in Bangladesh because they're on their way now. Places like Kenya, Holland, all the smaller countries that play in that competition, and they should be feeding money into those. It seems like they're not neglecting them, but everything seems to be focused around India, England, Australia, and then South Africa, New Zealand, whatever. So to see Afghanistan get in the Champions Trophy, which is going to be played in England later this year, which is the top 8 teams in Bangladesh, to see someone like Bangladesh get into the Champions Trophy in the top 8 teams, and the West Indies and Zimbabwe miss out. For countries like Bangladesh, man, that is huge. But Afghanistan, wow, what a wonderful, wonderful story that is.
Well, another example is Oman, where there's a population around 4 million. Some 3 of those 4 million are expats. So the Indians and Sri Lankans that have come there over the years has spawned another industry, let's call it, of cricket in that country. Again, back to Pakistan for a moment. We've talked about Afghanistan just then. Pakistan, the fact they're not playing in that country at the moment, they're playing in the UAE. Talk us through your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's really sad, and I have spoken at length after the incident with the Sri Lankan cricket team with their coach, who happened to be Trevor Bayliss, who now is the coach of England, and I played Sheffield Shield cricket with Trevor for 10 years. So when he got back from that, we actually caught up, and I just said, you know, what happened? And it was, mate, I was scared listening to the story. I mean, he tells this story of bullets zipping through the bus. I mean, 2 of the Sri Lankan guys got hit, and how scared and frightened they were. So the question has got to be asked, if another team goes back there, any international team, what is the security like? I mean, we can't have touring cricket teams go anywhere in the world where there's a security drama. If Pakistan and the ICC make sure that that's fine and give it the green light, and if it's us, for example, Australia will want to send people over there and look at everything, I'd have no dramas going back to Pakistan and playing.
Would you take Rowing Petersham there?
Well, until that time, I don't think anybody should go there.
Right.
Because it's dangerous. And unfortunately, sport now can be seriously politicised, and that's a really easy target for the so-called terrorists around the world. You know, it's a cricket team, and sport should never be involved in politics, but it has been. I mean, look at apartheid in South Africa. Exactly. They were banned. I played one game against South Africa in the '92 World Cup, and I was very happy to do that, to think that they were now back in the fold, because their cricket history alone is just rugby history as well, but the cricket history alone is phenomenal. They've said that's some of the greatest players of all time. But you've got to make sure everybody's safe. Now, I remember when I went to Sri Lanka with the Australian cricket team, we had guys on the bus all the time. With all due respect to the Tamil Tigers and the Tamils, they were actually on a bit of a march at that stage. I remember in 1983, I went to Zimbabwe with the Australian under-25s. We had security guys around us all the time as well. It can be very uncomfortable, but you've got to realise that you're a national team and you are a target. So until things in Pakistan change and the security can be better and there can be given an assurance that everything can be safe and everybody can be happy, then teams should go back there. Because the tragedy of it all is Pakistani people are cricket tragics, and they're not being able to see their home team or international cricket in their home country. And that is just the saddest thing of all.
Well, it adds to the fact that how well they've gone, despite not playing in their own home country. It's quite astounding, isn't it?
Unbelievable. They've got to play away. Every test match for them is an away game, and that's got to be excessively hard. I know they get some support in the UAE and that, and there's a lot of expats there, and they get big support there. But not to be able to play. Could you imagine saying to the Australians, oh, for the next X amount of years, you're not playing the Boxing Day test in Sydney, in Brisbane, in Adelaide. We've got to go and play in New Zealand.
Hard to imagine.
Oh, mate, it's like cutting your heart out.
Exactly.
So I'm sure they're feeling like that. And I'm sure all the players are are talking to the Pakistan Cricket Board and saying, what's happening? We want to play at home in front of our own people, and we want to have guests in our country who we can play against and entertain and make them feel safe and happy.
Well, let's hope the Pakistan Super League, with its final having been played in Lahore,
Yes.
would certainly help that process into the future.
Mate, that's gone swimmingly and seemingly well, and let's hope that is a tick and a little step up the rung in the ladder. Because I know everybody in Australia and the people that I'm still in contact with in the team, we all want to go to Pakistan and play, you know, and we want to encourage the people in Pakistan to make sure that they're looking at their own players and watching international cricket, and it's all back into that balanced world sort of balance of going to other countries as it should be.
Fingers crossed. We'll go to a break on TV Arcana. Welcome back. I've got Mike here. We're going to talk a bit about cricket, but about some of his personal life as well, but in particular the current Test series that's just happened between Australia and India. The likes of Kohli and Smith at each other's throats. Talk us through that.
Yeah, look, very interesting. Look, first, it's a very tough tour for any side to go there. India are a genuine powerhouse. They've got some amazing players, and look, I'm looking forward to the next 10 years to see Virat Kohli play. But when you're the captain of any cricket nation, I mean, look, in Australia they talk about the person who sits under the Prime Minister right there is the Australian cricket captain. It's enormous responsibility. I think what the players tend to forget is that when I first started playing, there was 2 cameras on the ground down the wicket. That was it. You could actually walk up to someone and give him a gobful, and no one outside of the players in earshot or the umpire would ever hear that. Now there's 55 cameras at the ground. And Virat disappointed me when India took a wicket and he turned around and went, and I read his lips and the camera's on his face there. And I thought, wow, you really haven't covered yourself in rose petals there, Virat. You are the captain of the Indian cricket team where there's in excess of 1 billion people and a huge audience around the world watching this. Then I saw Steve Smith in the stand say, F and cheat. And he apologised for that because he got caught as well. You've really got to be aware of that. The thing that disappointed me the most about Virat was that our guys, Steve Smith went to Rahane after the last test, who captained the side, and said, now it's all said and done, it's over. It was a very tough tour. We won. The other tests were really hard fought. Let's have a beer in the dressing room. And Virat said no. Now, for me, that's very poor play. Very poor play. I was always taught it can even be vicious on the ground. But once you walk past that gate, it's all over. I don't understand it. I don't get it. At the end of the day, we're just playing sport. Emotions get involved. I understand. I got very emotional that day with Moin Khan and Imran, and that was very emotional for me. And you're at the peak, and it's tough. It's high level. It doesn't get any higher level than playing a test series in India under the conditions with the crowd and all the sort of stuff like that. But I was very disappointed. I was very, very disappointed with a few things, but Virat should know better, and I hope someone pulls him back and has a word with him and says, you're the captain of India. You can't display that sort of behaviour, because at the end of the day, you've got to play these guys again and again and again. And I hope that something like this doesn't happen. Everybody's aware in Australia that Virat said, nope, no in the dressing room, no beer. I hope he doesn't get booed when he comes to Australia next time. I hope everybody forgets that, because that's really un-Australian. He doesn't have to be Australian, but he knows that's what we do. That's what we've always done for a couple of 100 years now. You go in and have a beer or a lemonade. It doesn't have to be beer, water with the boys and say, great series, really tough, really enjoyed it. We'll see you in a year's time when you're out in Australia, whatever that may, or in the IPL. They all play together. I found it very distasteful.
I must say the IPL has actually brought players together that not normally would be together. That's quite a plus of that series.
Yeah, it is, but what it stopped is the getting together after the games.
True.
Because in my day, you wouldn't see these guys maybe if you played county cricket or went to England, played league cricket. You mightn't see these guys for 12, 18 months, 2 years. So when you played against them, you wanted to get in the dressing room to say, hey, Norman, haven't seen you for a couple of years, been following your progress, you're doing great, blah, blah, blah. So now they're very close, they play together. Virat would have seen a lot of those guys now in the IPL. So, yeah, probably my mentality is old school.
I don't think so at all. Let's now turn to yourself for a moment and some of the disappointments you might have had, the lows through your cricket career.
Yeah, look, just prior to me really getting involved in cricket, probably the biggest low in my life was my father passing away when I was 16. And that was a serious shock for the whole family. And what do you do then when you haven't really got a male role model hanging over the top of you? That's when I went down to Randwick Cricket Club as a 17-year-old, and there's probably half a dozen, maybe 10 older gentlemen that are now in their 70s, some in their 80s, that played that role for me. So that was the first disappointment. In the cricket career, not too many. Look, I played a dozen tests, Norman. If I was picking the team, I would have played 50. But you're not picking the team. So I would have loved to play more tests. I would have loved to tour more. I would have loved to tour Pakistan. And, but you're not in control of that. But there was one, probably the most disappointing moment in my life was the 89 tour of England. And leading up to that, the selection of that tour, I'd had the most incredible season. I'd had a couple of great seasons back to back. And I only played one test match in that Australian season. That was against the West Indies, the 5th test in Adelaide. And I took 7 for 89 of 32 overs against this batting lineup that was Haynes, Greenwich, Viv, Richie Richardson, Carl Hooper, Gus Logie, Jeff Dujon. I mean, their top 7 was just this. And I got the Irish swing going down there, the reverse swing, and knocked them over. I was the leading wicket taker in Australian first-class cricket that season. And the leading wicket taker leading up to an Ashes series had always been picked on every Ashes tour. And I missed out. And I was...
Any idea why? Was there anything spoken to you, or was it something that went unsaid?
I asked the 4 selectors the following season what the problem was, and 3 of them said they'd pick me. So someone was lying, and 1 said he hadn't picked me. Well, he's the one that I have enormous respect for. The other 3 are questionable. Why would they say that? I mean, it's a long time ago now. But again, that was the series where Alan really blossomed as a captain. Steve Waugh just come good, and we won the Ashes. And that was the start of a really productive time for Australian cricket. And I would have really have loved to have been a part of that, but I wasn't. But I was very, very disappointed. But you've got to turn disappointments into a positive. Soon as that side went, I was probably the highest profile cricketer left in the country. And I started getting these phone calls, can you come and speak at this function? Can you make an appearance here? We've got this conference, can you come for 2 days and we'll pay you a fortune? And it was like, wow. So it started another angle of my life, and I've been on the after dinner speaking circuit pretty much ever since then, and love every minute of that. So even though I missed that out, and I'll always be disappointed, it opened up a few other doors for me while the boys were away.
Such as Who Dares Wins and the likes of Sydney Weekend?
Well, that came later after I retired in '94 and got into TV, but yeah, that all happened very quickly as well. I started doing Sydney Weekender to learn the trade as a host, and within a matter of a couple of months, this Who Dares Wins was thrown in front of me, and then the referee on Gladiators. And those shows were just ginormous. I mean, I went from doing a state-based show to all of a sudden being this national identity in television after the cricket. It was pretty weird, really. I mean, it was probably too much, too early, but the learning curve in TV can be a really slow one or a very, very steep one like this. And I went on the real steep one. And now I've been in the game nearly 25 years, and it's just, I love it. I really love it.
And we can watch that in the next weekend of shows. We can actually watch you on that show.
Sydney Weekend at 5:30 every Sunday on the 7 Network. Thanks for that.
But we're expecting that to be on TV Arcana real soon.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. The fact remains, to me, you're a wonderful person to be able to talk to. And again, we'll have you on as many times as we possibly can.
Good on you, Norman. Pleasure to be here, mate. Thanks very much.